Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm not joined by Taylor Rockwell today, but I'm joined by a man who knows an awful lot more about El Tri. His name is Cesar Hernandez. Cesar, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Always a good time talking about Mexican soccer, so looking forward to it.
Same here. So just to give people your credentials, I know you from the Mexican Soccer Show, which is an English language El Tri and Liga MX show, fair to say, and also some freelance writing.
Yes, correct. Currently writing for ESPN, The Athletic. Might be doing a little bit of work for The Score this summer, and I'm also the co-host of Shola's podcast. But basically, I spend way too much time watching soccer. I should probably find other hobbies.
No, you've got the best one. You've already got the best one. Why would you need another one?
It's nice and sunny outside in San Diego. Maybe I should find a different hobby. But yeah, for now, obviously, I'm a little too obsessed with soccer.
And of course, World Cup coming up for Mexico. I've got so many questions for you, Cesar. So I'm very grateful that you're willing to indulge me this morning. My first one is a question that I feel like Mexican fans have talked about a lot already. I know you've talked about it on the Mexican Soccer Show, but I watched the recent game. I saw Mexico versus Scotland. I saw a Mexico team win 1-0 as they prepare to head off to the World Cup. And I heard the fans boo. And I heard the Fire Osorio chants. And I'm really confused. Why are the fans booing the coach that got you to the World Cup? Because obviously the US would not be booing a coach that got them to the World Cup right now.
I mean, the fans at the Estadio Azteca, they're infamously fickle. You know, they expectedly boo Mexico if they aren't winning by a large margin. You know, during the last qualifiers for the 2014 World Cup, I remember at one point, I forget exactly who the opposition was. I think it was Jamaica, but it was 0-0 after a long time. And the Azteca fans started cheering on the opposition. I mean, that's just something it's just not out of the ordinary at the Estadio Azteca. And of course, when you couple that with the fact that Osorio is just very disliked by many Mexican fans. I've made the argument that he's the most polarizing figure in Mexican soccer just because his rotations are highly criticized. I mean, you can see before the match started, there's a video that went out of, they're announcing the starting 11 and, of course, the fans were cheering for all the individual players. But then when Osorio's name was read out and the image of him popped up on the screen and just an immense amount of boos all over the stadium. So the only way he was really going to win them over was with a 4 or 5 nothing win. And I think whether that's Osorio, whether that be a Piojo, whether that be an Aguirre, whether that be, just fans expect just really dominant performances there. And because it was Osorio who wasn't getting a 4 or 5 nothing win, then of course immediately they started to boo him.
So it's just his turn to get booed, basically.
Correct. Yeah, correct. It's just, yeah.
What about the fans that complain about the rotation or rotación? I believe is
rotaciones.
Rotaciones. So the concept is, if anyone isn't aware, Juan Carlos Osorio really does sort of change the team, changes the 11, changes the shape from game to game. It seems to me. Just your personal opinion. Are you in favour of this approach, or is there some validity to the criticism?
I'm in favor, but to an extent. I think it all depends on how it's implemented. I think Osorio has been more practical about it recently. He's no longer doing it at an extreme that we saw in the 2016 Copa America, in which he used 3 different goalkeepers at 3 group stage matches, which was a little, it's a little much.
Right.
It's definitely a little much to be using 3 different goalkeepers, 3 group stage matches. But nowadays he's much more predictable. He's much more practical about it. I think it gives an opportunity to younger players. I think that it's, it keeps things a little bit more unexpected for the opposition as well. And it has paid off. I do think that Mexico has looked, I would say, even more confident now. I know that a lot of people, the big complaint will regardless of the rotations, Osorio has yet to win a title. And I think that that's something that he still needs to work on. I think he'll have a good opportunity. I'm not going to say Mexico is going to win the World Cup because that's crazy. But I think he has a good opportunity to really thrive in the World Cup this summer, utilizing those rotations. But to an extent, like I said, I think that you'll see fewer players swapped in a group stage. You won't see anything like the Copa America debacle. And it seems as though the whole team buys into it. And many have defended him. Marquezs, Chicharito, Layun, they've all defended Osorio. I mean, recently after the latest one, I think went over Scotland, Carlos Salcedo told the press that, that they are there day to day like he is. He said the most important thing is that the group believes in what the coach says and does. So I think the team really buys into it. But yeah, I think it's, as long as Osorio keeps it, I like the rotations, maybe like a couple of different player swaps during the group stage. I wouldn't be bothered with that, but as long as he isn't doing what he was doing in the 2016 Copa America, then I'm fine.
So yeah, can we go back to that? Because some of our listeners may not be familiar with what happened. My memory from 2 years ago is that Mexico were kind of rolling, right? And looking like a good team. I remember a win over Uruguay that was really impressive. And then there was the game against Chile, which I believe was 7-0, 7-1.
7-0.
7-0. Yeah, sorry to have to bring it back up. But
it's okay. It's good to talk about it.
That really does seem to be if you want to play a card against Osorio, that's the card you would play, right? Against the rotations, you would say, yeah, but look what happened with this. But it sounds like what you're telling me is that he's not doing it to the same extent, so maybe that sort of debacle doesn't happen again.
Correct. I mean, I don't think we'll be seeing that again. Osorio definitely took some time I think he took a decent amount of time off to kind of figure out what happened. And I don't think and he's admitted to mistakes from that match, and I think what happened was, okay, so you look at you said, let's go back to that Copa America. So during the group stage, Mexico finished in first place, but despite the fact that they finished in first place, people were still hesitant about Osorio's tactics. They thought Mexico got a little lucky. They thought that obviously the 3-1 win over Uruguay to start off the group stage was probably one of Mexico's better performances in a long time. But then the 2-0 win over Jamaica was a little unexciting, and then they got a 1-1 draw against Venezuela, which was secured after Tecatito got an 80th minute goal. So people were still very worried about Mexico, not only confidence-wise heading into the to the knockout round, but also people were worrying about the rotations, which were, like I said, it's something that we don't really see nearly as much as we see now, but it was looking a little, I don't know, it was looking far too experimental. So then people were saying, a lot of his criticizers, and a lot of his criticizers, even when Mexico was doing well in friendlies or World Cup qualifiers, they've always said that, I mean, despite Mexico's wins, that they always don't look nearly as, I don't know, they don't nearly look as dominant as they really should be. So then that on June 18th? Yeah, it was June 18th against Chile, where they just got demolished, just 7-0. And like you said, that is the example that fans still use. And it's just like, oh, well, don't forget about that 7-0 match. Don't forget about that 7-0 match. Oh, sure, yeah, Osorio did well during qualifiers, but don't forget about that 7-0 match. It's still, it is still something that lingers above the team. I think it's dissipating. I don't think it's something that probably lives in their minds just yet, but it's something that fans have yet to forgive Osorio for.
So beyond the rotations, which seems to be the thing that most people will talk about in their previews about Mexico, because it is a big piece of the story, right? Do Mexico have a consistent style of play no matter what sort of shape or personnel, or does the style of play also vary from lineup to lineup?
No. I would say that the style of play, it's pretty simple to figure it out. It's attack-minded and possession-based, and I think that just regardless of the opposition, Mexico likes to take charge of opposition, likes to be on the front foot. And even his formations, they're pretty predictable now too. Osorio, I mean, in comparison to other managers, yes, he is a little bit more experimental, but now you can easily kind of figure out what he's going to do. I mean, probably against Germany, we'll see a 4-2-3-1. South Korea, probably like a 4-3-3 that turns into a 3-4-3. Sweden will probably see a 4-3-3 as well. So it is a little bit easier to predict what Osorio will be doing. Of course, it wouldn't be surprising if my predictions were wrong, but I think just when you look at what's happened in the past several months, you can kind of figure out what Osorio is going to be doing. And like I said, you could still figure that he does like to be in the front foot, likes to be attack-minded, likes to be possession-based, and he likes to, and I think a good example of what we might be seeing that is, for example, we saw Mexico get the draw against Belgium last year, and you saw Mexico going with a 4-2-3-1, and I think that friendly kind of was a good example of what Osorio is going to want to do in the World Cup, and especially against a team like Germany, because it's something that you tend to see. I mean, if you're talking about difficult opposition, what we should expect from Mexico, I think that was kind of a blueprint of what Mexico will be doing against Germany, and it's going to be that 4-2-3-1 with two defensive midfielders, maybe one guy drifting a little bit more, but I would say it's two defensive midfielders, but But so yeah,
that's interesting to me because I look at the roster and I don't necessarily see a load of defensive midfielders. So who's it going to be? Who are those? Who's the two going to be in the 4-2-3-1?
Yeah, I mean, really quickly about those defensive midfielders. I don't have nearly as many complaints about Osorio as other fans do, and a lot of fans have a lot of complaints about Osorio. But the one thing that does actually bother me is that I would have liked to have seen more defensive midfielders as well. There was a guy named Jesus Molina who was a true defensive midfielder who wasn't called up. He was dropped at the last minute, and I would have liked to have seen that. But I think Osorio seems to have trust in his current roster. I think he seems to have faith in Diego Reyes, Edson Alvarez, and in theory, you could say Guardado, Herrera, and Jonathan Dos Santos could also play in that defensive midfield role, but it would probably only be Herrera or Guardado that play in that role. So I think if Reyes is healthy, and it looks like he is close to being back to full fitness, he'll be in that position. And I think when you have Reyes there, then you'll have someone like an Herrera or Guardado who can still be a defensive midfielder, but won't be afraid to push up if needed. So I would say...
Am I right in thinking Diego Reyes is a centre-back, but he also plays defensive midfield? I think I've seen him pop up in both spots for Mexico.
Correct. Yeah, and he's played in both positions for Porto as well. So this isn't... I know a lot of fans criticize the fact that he plays a defensive midfield role and say that that's not his true position, but he has actually played as a defensive midfielder before at the club level. So yeah.
So he was in that spot against Belgium in the game that you say is kind of maybe a template for what Mexico would do against Germany, which, if people aren't aware, that's Mexico's first game of the tournament, right? So it's a big deal. I'm sure there's a lot of prep going into that game.
Yeah, he actually started alongside Guardado. They were essentially the two defensive midfielders in that game against Belgium back in the day. So I wouldn't be surprised if we were to see those two start as the two defensive midfielders.
Do you have any other ideas about specific things Osorio might do against Germany?
Against Germany, I mean, past that, it's a little difficult to tell. I think you can see the 4-2-3-1. You'll probably see two defensive midfielders. I think Osorio won't be afraid to try to take possession of the ball. I think he won't be afraid to be a little bit attack minded. But other than that, it's a little difficult to tell what he'll be doing against Germany. I think the last time that the two faced, that's another criticism that Mexico fans have is that loss to Germany, that 4-1 loss in the Confederations Cup last year. That was another big thing that fans have complained about, just because when Germany first got those 2 goals, immediately the first thing that came to everyone's mind, and I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be surprising if that was the first thing that came to mind for players as well, is that they thought, oh my God, is this going to be another 7-0?
Right.
Is this going to be another one of those games in which we get completely demolished by one of the best sides in the world, and embarrassingly enough, by one of the best sides in the world, which didn't bring their A team to the Confederations Cup. So Mexico, they were a little worried by that, but I think Mexico actually did a good job of bouncing back and actually creating a lot of opportunities. But of course, when you look at that scoreline, I mean, there's just a 4-1 win there. I mean, there's one clear side which was highly dominant over the other.
What about the attacking options? Because I look at the roster and I see so many attackers, right? So it's at most, if it's the 4-2-3-1, it's like 4 attackers you can squeeze into that, right? Or maybe a 4-3-3. It seems to me that any lineup, a lot of talent is going to have to sit on the bench. I'm thinking of names like, Tecatito, Chucky Lozano, obviously Chicharito and Raul Jimenez I really like. And then there's a couple more names even farther down the roster after that, right? So do you have a preference for sort of who takes those attacking positions? Or do you just sort of trust Osorio to just pick 4 from however many guys there are?
Well, I definitely have. I mean, ideally, I like the idea of Lozano and Vela as a starting wingers. I like Chicharito as a front man. And I like behind them, you can have someone like Hector Herrera. I think he's a very well-rounded center midfielder who could be an excellent attacking midfielder. But another option, which might be a little exciting too if you want a lot of pace, is you could move Vela to center attacking midfielder position, and then you could bring Tecatito on one of the wings. You could also bring on Marco Fabian as a center attacking midfielder and keep Vela on the wing. So Mexico they have no lack of options there. If Chicharito's having a bad game, then you bring on Raul Jimenez, as you mentioned. You could even bring on Jonathan Dos Santos, does a decent job too, if he wants to be a little bit more attack-minded. So there's a lot of different ways that Osorio could go here with the attack, but I would expect Vela and Lozano to be the starting wingers, and as long as Vela, Lozano, Chicharito are given the start for Mexico, then I'll be pretty happy.
So thinking about the two wide guys you mentioned, have I got this right that they both are like inverted? Because I keep seeing Vela on the right coming in with his left foot, and I believe Lozano is right-footed and starts on the left. So is that
Correct.
part of the idea? Is that maybe we're not getting to the byline and crossing, but we're dribbling in or sort of trying to make diagonal progress into the box with the ball?
Correct. And both love to shoot after they cut in and then shoot with their dominant foot. That's something that you see. I mean, it's almost like a stereotypical thing that you see with Chucky. It's just sprinting down the left wing, cut in with your right foot, and then take a shot. And then with Vela, at least in the last several months, that's something that we've been seeing. That's a little similar with LAFC, and with some like incredible shots that he's had on that, incredibly accurate and well-placed shots where he goes down the right wing or he goes down in his center attack midfield position. He cuts in with his left foot and then takes just an incredible shot. So I think that is something that's to be expected, is to have those two inverted wingers and to provide some crosses as well to Chicharito. I don't think they're just going to be sprinting down the wing and then providing a cross from distance. I think that maybe they'll provide some decent short crosses or some decent passes to Chicharito too. So I think that, yeah, like you said, it's two inverted wingers there for El Tri.
And then maybe if we see Raul Jimenez coming on, does that maybe signal a change in approach? Like maybe that's the 80th minute and we're going to start sending some big balls in?
Yeah, no, I think so, because Jimenez, what he provides, it's a little bit more different from Chicharito. He's taller, he's a little bit stronger, he's more physical. He brings a more physical presence. So I do think that if they're to bring him in, I would be surprised if Chicharito were to stay in the 11. I mean, that's not something we haven't seen that's out of the ordinary from Mexico. We have seen Osorio sometimes push Chicharito to the left wing, and then Jimenez or someone like Oribe up as a true number 9. But more than likely, I'd expect Mexico struggling for a goal there. They'll probably switch out Chicharito for Jimenez for a man-for-man switch.
What about Rafa Marquezz?
That guy.
Yeah, there's a 39-year-old name we haven't mentioned yet, but he's on the roster. So first question is, was that a surprise to you? And the second question is, what's his role? Like, how much will he play?
I mean, the only reason why it isn't a surprise is just because there have been rumblings about it for months and months and months and months. I mean, it's just something that it isn't something that suddenly out of nowhere somebody's like, you know what, I like Rafa, bring him up. No, he's been in the conversation for a while. It's been kind of like a back and forth whether he's going to go or not. Obviously, when he was accused of money laundering for drug cartels back in late 2017, that obviously didn't help, and it looked like that might have been the end of his career. But he took a few months off, and it looks like he started to find his form a little bit over at Atlas. It wasn't exactly the best season that he's had with the club side, but what he represents more so than anything else is just a leadership role. He's a living legend. Right. Just the way that the players revere this guy. I mean, it's and this is a man who also trusts Osorio as well. So I think Osorio sees this guy as crucial for him, regardless of whether he gets minutes or not. I wouldn't be surprised if he does get minutes, but I don't think he'll be getting a start. And if he does get minutes, it will probably be as a defensive midfielder, just to kind of slow things down, just to help maintain possession, and also to help provide some passes. Because, man, I mean, I know he's 39 years old, which is incredible. He's going to be taking part in his 5th World Cup. But and although he does lack a lot of pace, what you do still recognize with Rafa is that he can still provide some excellent passes. I've said before in the past that Rafa's he could be like Mexico's quarterback. Just the way that he's able to distribute the ball, and it's so accurate. They're just so intelligent too. It really does. It's almost frustrating to watch it as a Mexico fan, because you think, why can't we have someone half his age or just 10 years younger who could be doing this right now with his distribution? So, yeah, I mean, I don't think he'll be getting a start, and I think that he's obviously a liability when it comes to pace, a huge liability when it comes to pace. But I think if Osorio wants to slow things down, and if he needs a bigger, maybe even more of a physical presence too, if you want to take out like a Guardado, then I don't think it would be the worst ideal. It's not it's not my ideal situation, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens.
So is that maybe a sort of a 2-0 up, 20 minutes to go? Yeah. Let's see this out. Let's put Rafa in, and then maybe we even see one of those beautiful long passes for someone to counter-attack. And he sort of has a glorious assist in the group stage.
Yeah, and somehow 39-year-old Rafa Marquez will be getting this. That would be incredible. Or I mean, he is still a threat, an aerial threat as well.
Yeah, the US knows that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But so I mean, man, if he were to score during the World Cup, I don't know, man, that'd be that would be incredible if that were to happen. I mean, just because once again, this is a living legend, and it was almost laughable to think that he'd be going to his 5th World Cup when people were bringing it up, even last year. People were thinking like, oh, well, that'd be really, really funny if Rafa were to somehow find his way into this roster, but he has. And I think a lot of it has to do, once again, because of this leadership, because of what he represents, for not only just for Mexican soccer, but just Mexicans in general, because he's a Mexican icon. It really extends outside the sport just because of what he's done at a very young age. When he first started with El Tri, he's been relevant for so long. What he's done with Barcelona, what he did with Monaco, when he's just is. I mean, obviously, no one's talked about his time with the New York Red Bulls. I don't think he wants to talk about that either. If I remember correctly, I think he said it might have been a mistake to go over there to New York Red Bulls. But it would be. I mean, I'm just imagining him scoring goal. But anywho, yeah.
All right, so we've mentioned Rafa Marquez and Diego Reyes, excuse me. But neither of them are all that likely to play centre-back. So who will be playing centre-back for Mexico at this World Cup?
So it looks like, Moreno looks like he's going to be back to full fitness. We'll see. I guess we'll get a little bit of a better idea in Mexico's final preparatory match against Denmark this weekend. So the big question is who starts alongside Moreno. It would have been Araujo, but Araujo is also injured, so he was dropped out of the World Cup squad. So I think the player right now that looks more than likely to be getting minutes right there is it's probably going to be either Salcedo or Ayala. And I think all signs point to Hugo Ayala playing that position. It's not. I would say he is a very good Liga MX player, but
does he play for Monterrey?
He plays for Tigres. Tigres.
Oh, I've seen him play against Monterrey back when I was watching every Jonathan Gonzalez game. That's
So he plays for Tigres. And in the recent match against Scotland, you actually saw Ayala playing at that right center back position. You could also, like I mentioned, you could also see Carlos Salcedo playing there, although he is a little bit more so of a right back for El Tri. But it looks like Ayala will be the guy. He'll be one of the, and if that were true, he'd be one of the few Liga MX, Mexico-based starters for the national team. He's not exactly. I wouldn't say he's a massive weak link for El Tri, but I just don't think that he is at the level of someone like an Herrera or a Chucky or a Layun or an Ochoa. Right. I think that he doesn't really tend to stand out nearly as much as the other defensive players. I feel like sometimes he can get a little lost back there, but it isn't a terrible option. But he is a veteran. He is someone who, it's not like he lacks any confidence, but it's not the best player you want out there. But it looks like more than likely it's going to be Hugo Ayala in that position.
All right, so Ayala and Hector Moreno.
Yeah, probably Ayala and Moreno. You might see Reyes drop back there, but more than likely, I think if Reyes is going to be on the field, I think Osorio wants him as a defensive midfielder.
So you mentioned Miguel Layun. This guy, every time I see him, I really think he's a really good player, but he's always in a different position. I've seen him play right back, left back, centre midfield. So where does he play for Mexico? In the Scotland game, I believe he was in midfield, but when I asked you to name the midfielders earlier, he wasn't listed. So yeah, what is Osorio doing with him, and what do you think where will he go during the World Cup?
So I think he'll be the left back. I think that's more of his traditional role with El Tri. He tends to be the left back. Sometimes he'll play as a right back as well. Obviously, we saw him playing in a more attack-minded role in that midfield against Scotland. Him and Gil dos Santos, they're working close to each other. But I mean, this is a guy who's extremely versatile. It's just, I think he might be one of the most versatile Mexican players of all time. I mean, if you're just looking at what he's done at the club level in Europe, he's played as a center mid, a left mid, a right mid, a winger, a left back, a right back, and a center back. I think the only position he has yet to play for any of his club sides in Europe is goalkeeper and striker. I think those are the only positions that he has yet to play. But with L3, I think that he'll be playing in a left back position. I think and although he is capable of playing in a more attack-minded role, and I think Osorio was kind of testing him out there just in case, because just in case he needs him there, because right now he might need to switch things around if all his players aren't healthy. But I think Mexico doesn't really lack any attack-minded midfielders.
I was going to say, there's no shortage, right?
Yeah, there's no shortage. I mean, even looking at the bench, you'll probably have someone like Fabian or Jonathan Dos Santos or Aquino, who can jump off there. Giovanni Dos Santos too, although he hasn't exactly been in the best run of form with the Galaxy, so maybe he won't be getting that many minutes. But yeah, there's no lack of options there.
Was he a surprise inclusion on the roster? Because I expected, say, other attackers like Jurgen Damm, who've been around a while, but Gio Dos Santos, the bad form for the LA Galaxy. Why was he included? What do you think the thinking is?
If I were to, I've defended Gio Dos Santos in the past, but it's been really hard to defend him just for what's been happening in the last, I guess season and a half. I'm not entirely sure. It just hasn't been good because whether it be for club or country, he's just been really disappointing. So you do wonder if there's something here that extends off the field. Clearly his brother Jonathan is still highly relevant to the national team. Clearly Gio's a very good friend, and he's very close to the rest of the roster as well. And I think when you look at one of the strengths of the national team is that there's a core group of players who have been playing together for quite some time. And a lot of these guys, you look at the ages of this roster, and a lot of these guys are at the peak of their career. They're in their late 20s, early 30s, and these are guys who have been, like I said, it's a very tight and cohesive group of friends. You can see it on social media that these are guys who clearly love to hang out with each other. It doesn't seem like there's any bad blood within the roster. So I think my guess is that Osorio is bringing him along, knowing that he could potentially be an option off the bench. He probably, who knows what's going on during training. I don't think he would be the first option off the bench, but I think he's bringing him along because of keeping that cohesion of the group, keeping the group happy, keeping because a big part of Osorio's preparation for the World Cup, and it looks like he's bringing along Emmanuel Ibarrondo, who is basically a team psychologist, has been about preparing the team mentally, and I think this is part of that strategy: is keeping the group happy and keeping someone like Gio within the squad.
I'm a big believer in that stuff. I think that's, especially in a World Cup where you have to spend so much time together, I think that stuff's really, really important. That maybe even a more informed player who's just more trouble at the hotel is not worth the trade-off.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're going to be spending most of their time playing FIFA together and hanging out, and then occasionally they'll be stepping out into the actual field and playing. But no, I think that once again, you look at it's very, very easy when you look at the social media accounts from these players that Gio Dos Santos is a very, very good for a lot of these guys. Especially someone like Carlos Vela as well. You can see Vela and the Dos Santos brothers are all very close. So I think that there's something that extends off the field here, and it's just about keeping this core group of players. And it's not like he's an awful player. It's not like he's a terrible player. He's a decent backup to have. I don't think he'll be getting any starts, but he's someone who could still be utilized, who's still versatile too in his positioning off the bench. Yeah,
I just saw him score against Scotland as well. So I rewatched that game this morning. So he's still got something, right?
Yeah, and after he got that goal, the first guy he celebrated with is Osorio. He ran straight to Osorio.
So I read that at the time because the roster hadn't been named at the time of that game, right? Because it was last week or so. I read that as maybe sort of just please put me on the roster. Please put me on the roster. But hearing from you that he's that sort of guy that everybody loves, it's more touching that he did that. That it didn't seem to be as self-serving as I thought it was at the time.
Yeah, my guess is it's almost like we proved everyone wrong. Thanks so much for putting this trust in me. Yes. I think that's what it was, because Gio is probably one of the more criticized players within the roster. It obviously doesn't help that he's gone to MLS because of that Mexico-USA rivalry. A lot of that animosity extends over to MLS versus Liga MX as well. Yeah. So because he's been there and because he hasn't been thriving in MLS, a lot of fans dislike him. So I think that I think that when he went to go celebrate with Osorio, that showed it was basically just like a thanks for putting that trust in me. We just show them.
So just to take us off topic slightly, there is the rumor of Osorio maybe taking the US job after the World Cup. Like, I know it's not definite; it's just a possibility, right? Would there be a gigantic backlash against him from Mexico fans if he did that?
I don't think so. I think that there'd be a strong group of Mexico fans, like a strong majority, that would probably just be happy that he left, regardless of whether he went to the U.S. men's national team or whether he went to go coach in somewhere in an unknown part of the world. I think fans don't care who he coaches; they just care that he is leaving the team. I don't think it would be that big of a deal. I think it would be fascinating if he were to take the job to see what the reaction would be like from the fans during any of those friendlies or during any of those matches, because it's inevitable. U.S. and Mexico, they're always going to face each other at least a couple times per year.
Yeah, there's a game booked for September in Nashville. Yeah,
so that would be fascinating to see if that were true, if Osorio were to take the U.S. job. But I think what most fans would feel, just because he is such a polarizing figure, and because a lot of fans are even, a couple weeks before the World Cup, we're chanting "Fuera Osorio" in the Estadio Azteca. I think what's more significant to them is just that he's leaving. I think, regardless of who he coaches.
What if he takes Mexico to the quarterfinals?
The crazy thing about how hated Osorio is and how polarizing he is, I think he would immediately become a national hero, just because of the obsession with the Quinto Partido.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this. I believe you wrote about this, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you called it, the Quinto Partido, does that mean the fifth part?
The fifth game.
The fifth game. Okay, so the fifth game is the quarterfinal. And for those who don't know, would you mind sort of explaining the situation with that?
Yeah. So it almost seems like a World Cup curse for Mexico. And I think that Mexico fans also have to recognize how blessed they are. And I think that's something that Mexico fans have to recognize, that it's really, really nice that Mexico consistently makes it out of the group stage. A lot of nations would just love to qualify for the World Cup, let alone qualify to the next stage. But for the last 6 World Cups, so in 1994, 1998, 2002, 2006, 2010, 2014, Mexico has always exited from the World Cup from the round of 16. So they've always played a total of 4 matches in every World Cup since the 90s. So because it's just such a crushing. Once again, it's just a crushing curse for the national team. It almost represents. Now, although you see some improvement since the 90s, you see more players going abroad. You see more players like a Chicharito, who's become more so of a household name. You see more players thriving. But of course, on the world stage, people are saying, where is that development in a World Cup if we've finished in the same exact position for 6 tournaments in a row? And especially the last one in 2014, that was the most crushing one of all, because it looked like Mexico was minutes away from potentially doing that against the Netherlands. And of course, people are still talking about Nora Penal. I'm sure you're going to see Nora Penal memes and GIFs and whatnot when Robin flopped and ended up losing to the Netherlands in the round of 16. So I think that if Osorio reaches that quinto partido, that 5th game where they can take part in a 5th match and make it to the quarterfinals, something they haven't done since 1986, then he would immediately become a national hero. I think I would be very convinced that would happen, which is just so fascinating. I mean, I think that says a lot about the obsession about the quinto partido, that someone so hated and someone so, despised, by Mexican national team fans, that someone like that could just completely make a 180 and then just become an icon. Because no one has reached that stage. No one has been able to do that since, like I said, 1986. But oddly enough, Osorio, he does. I don't think he's thinking about that quinto partido. And I think that actually, if I heard correctly, like that's not something that's talked about by Osorio or by the team psychologist Imanol Ibarrondo. Apparently, they're setting their goals higher. And in a media day in Beverly Hills 2 weeks ago, Osorio was asked, what are your goals for the World Cup? And he said, we think we can make it to the final, which is, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, that would be an incredible achievement. But I think that says a lot about how he's not thinking about the quinto partido. He's thinking of something greater than that. So I do wonder if that's going to help with the pressure of going into that quinto partido, if it does happen. Remember, once again, we can't take that for granted that Mexico's made it past the group stage for every World Cup since 1994.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if that takes the pressure off and be like, and if they do make it to the quinto partido, they aren't thinking, oh my God, we can make history here, and that maybe in their minds thinking, no, Osorio said our goal is making it to the final. Let's keep pushing. I don't know. I do wonder about maybe that'll help a little bit.
It reminds me a little bit of England and the penalty kicks. Like, it seems it's become sort of a national obsession. And then I always wonder how, as you just sort of referenced, how much is it talked about within the team and how much is it just a media and fan obsession versus the people on the field obsession?
Yeah, so it looks like, I mean, right now it's more so of a media and fan obsession, but it looks like, at least within the national team group, that that's not something that's being discussed. It's not something that's really being talked about. And I think that, the more I think about it, I think that that's kind of a good strategy.
Yeah.
Because it takes the pressure off the players. And as opposed to saying, oh, make our country proud, make it to the quinto partido, you could instead say, no, our goal is to make it to the final. That is what we're trying to do. We think we can achieve this. We've discussed this. So regardless of what happens, just continue to push on. So I do think that takes some pressure off for the players, and I think it's clever if Osorio is actually doing that.
All right, final question, Cesar. What makes you most optimistic that Mexico can go deep at this World Cup, and what's your biggest concern that it might not happen?
So I think when you look at the players, I already talked about there's a cohesion there. It's a tight group of friends, and I think that gives me a little bit of confidence. And you also look at, once again, the age. You look at these guys, they're all at their prime, and a lot of these guys, it's going to be probably their last World Cup. You see someone like a Guardado, who's 31 years old. You've seen someone like Vela, who's 29, Chicharito, who's 30. You see Herrera, who's 28, Fabian, 28, Jonathan Dos Santos, 28. Obviously, they could still potentially play in another World Cup, but they won't be at the very peak of their career. So I think a lot of these guys, that this is probably going to be the most important World Cup in their careers. And these are a lot of these guys who have either played in Europe who are currently playing abroad, who've had successful seasons. I mean, we've seen Ochoa. He recently gained a title. We saw the guys over at Porto. They recently gained a title. We saw Tecatito with PSV. My bad. Chucky Lozano was PSV. I mean, he had an incredible debut season. And end up winning an Eredivisie title. I think a lot of guys are going into this with really good form. I got to bring up Guardado as well, who played very well at Real Betis, and they end up qualifying for Europa League. So Marco Fabian winning and Carlos Salcedo, who won the German Cup title over Bayern Munich, which is crazy. I mean, Fabian obviously wasn't playing that match, but he had dealt with some injury issues, but he was a significant part of that roster. But a lot of these guys are going into this at the prime of their career with a lot of confidence, with successful seasons abroad. And I think that, I don't know, one of the bigger problems that Mexico has had in the past is there's always been a question of the mental aspect of the players. That Mexico, they're very, very good technically. There's no lack of exciting youth players, but there's always something about the mental aspect, about them needing a little bit more confidence, maybe letting the occasion get to them. And I think by Osorio, who is just, I don't know, who's just kind of obsessed with preparation, obsessed with every aspect of the national team, which included the hiring of that team psychologist. I think that he's gonna. I'm confident with his preparation. I think Mexico's gonna do well. Although my heart says they'll make it to the quinto partido, but my brain does say they'll probably get knocked out of the round of 16. But then again, that wouldn't be a terrible World Cup if they were to get knocked out of the round of 16. But I don't know. I think they can still thrive, and I'm optimistic about them.
Do you have any major concerns then?
It's a defense. It's really the defense. I think that the injury to Araujo, just a guy who's been so crucial for the guy who's worked very well with Moreno in the back, I think that that's not really talked enough about right now by Mexican media. Obviously, like some of the bigger things that they care about is just the party that recently happened with the national team players, and then the players who were left out. That gets a little bit more attention. But I am worried about Araujo not being there. I think Ayala is going to play as at right center back, but I'm not entirely convinced. Like I said, I think he's a weak link. He's not a massive weak link, but he's just someone who hasn't spent nearly as many minutes as Araujo working with the starting 11. And then if you don't have Ayala there, then do you drop back Diego Reyes? And if you drop back Diego Reyes, what does that mean for the defensive midfield position? I don't know. It's just, I think that Araujo injury has really, really, really made things a little difficult for El Tri defensively. And I think that whether it be Ayala or whether it be anyone else, it's just not ideal for Mexico heading into the World Cup without Araujo.
Are there any concerns about the guys like Reyes and I believe Guardado who were coming back from injury? Like, is there any worry that they play 50, 60, 70% fit at the World Cup?
Yeah, I think there are some worries. I think that's something that we'll have to see what develops over the next several days. I mean, the World Cup's about to start next week, so there's limited time now. But all signs point to them being at least Guardado being healthy and fit. Reyes, he's returned to playing with training with the first team. Let's see if he gets some minutes this Saturday, and if he doesn't get any minutes this Saturday, then that's when I think Mexico fans should really start to get worried about Reyes, because if you bring out Reyes, then that's another player. I'm not going to say that he is a crucial starting 11, but he's been such a figure there in the starting 11 that Osorio might have to mix things up a little bit more with his options in that starting 11. And maybe that means starting someone like Edson Alvarez, a young 20-year-old, in that defensive midfield position. So I think there's nothing to be worried about just yet. But if Reyes doesn't get the start, or let's say maybe even Guardado, I mean, it looks like Guardado's training with the team again, but maybe he won't be 100% fit. I think if they don't get minutes against Denmark this Saturday, then that's when you really truly start to worry.
Oh, final thing I want to ask you about, Cesar. Sorry,
yeah.
I lied when I said the final question is about optimism. What do you make of the Fox Sports push to have Americans make Mexico their team for the World Cup?
I think it's weird. I mean, it's not even just. I mean, you see a lot of that recently. You've seen, I think Doug McIntyre released a video saying like, "Oh, Americans, why not root for Mexico?" You see, Alexi Lalas basically put in his support. There's a strange piece on ESPN the other day from a guy named Gustavo Arellano who was telling Americans to root for Mexico. The Men in Blazers, they had a live show 2 weeks ago that was surprisingly Mexico-centric. It wasn't all about El Tri. They had other guests and whatnot, but at the very end, they're trying to cater to the Mexican-American audience, and they brought even Pancho Villa's Army, which is a supporters group for the Mexican national team over the U.S. And I'm sure there are other examples too, but I really love the rivalry between the U.S. men's national team and between El Tri, and I would find it just as odd if Mexico fans were being told that it was okay to support the U.S. men's national team.
Yeah,
it feels very contrived. It feels very strange, and I know that some networks are eager to cash in on Mexico's World Cup run because the U.S. men's national team are not there. But I don't know. It feels. I'm not saying the U.S. men's national team, that U.S. soccer fans can't support Mexico, because I know plenty who have supported both. But it's just that I feel like it would dilute the rivalry. It would really, really dilute the rivalry, and I'm not a fan of it.
So I can tell you that from my perspective, and I'm thinking from my co-host Taylor's perspective, we'll just watch Mexico like we always do when they're not playing the US, which is to just watch them like any other team, right? They're interesting, and you just watch and enjoy the game. You don't have to root for or against. And I'm not going to root for or against just because a corporation tells me to, because they want to generate some more revenue for the World Cup.
Yeah.
Because I think you're right that maybe it is a little commercially contrived in a way that like we're missing this US piece, so let's try and replace it with this Mexico piece. I'd be more on board with it if they were telling people in the US to support Mexico in 2014 and 2010 and 2006 as well.
Yeah, we all know it's going to be short-lived. We all know that. We all know, when we see Alexi Lalas now like wearing a Mexico jersey, I don't think that's going to be happening after the World Cup. And once again, I think if it was the other way around, if for whatever reason Mexico didn't qualify for the World Cup, and remember that almost happened in 2014, if it were the other way around and suddenly people were telling me, like, you know what, root for the U.S. men's national team. Root for the U.S. men's national team. Come on, Mexicanos. Let's support our CONCACAF brothers. That would feel just as strange and odd to me. I love the Mexico USA rivalry. I think it's fascinating. I think it's a really, really fascinating one. And once again, I would hate for it to be diluted. I'm be spending a lot. Should be having a piece coming out soon for The Athletic, literally about this. Me having an issue with this. So
oh, great. Okay.
Keep an eye on that one. I'm not entirely sure when I'm going to release it, but that's something that I'm going to be working on soon with The Athletic. But it's, I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. And if you're a U.S. men's national team fan who dislikes L3, continue to dislike them. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to support them, go for it. More power to you if you really want to do that. But don't feel like you have to support L3 because some company or some, I don't know. It's so contrived. I'm not a fan.
I guess, US fans who really sort of feel that rivalry and want to root against Mexico, you can still tune in to root against Mexico, right? Fox still gets the ratings. They could watch Mexico the same way I watch Westworld.
Yeah, there you go. You can hate watch it. You can hate watch Mexico. Go for it. Why not?
Actual final question for you, Cesar. What will you be working on during the World Cup?
Probably a little too much, but I'll be doing some pieces for ESPN. I'll be writing for The Athletic. I'm also going to be doing some work for The Score.
Mexican Soccer Show? Will you guys be putting episodes out?
Oh yeah, 100%. We'll be doing some stuff for the Mexican Soccer Show. I'm sure I'm forgetting something here, but I think the bigger thing is that I'll be clearly be very busy with the Mexican Soccer Show. I think we're going to be trying to do at least one show a week. Which I'll probably be hosting because Wisa will be in Russia. But yeah, keep an eye out. I'll be doing most of my more prominent work will be on ESPN and The Athletic.
Okay, Cesar, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I have learned a lot about L3.
Oh, thanks so much. Always a good time talking Mexican soccer.
Slice